Welcome to Cultivated Live for Friday, March 22nd, 2024. I am Jay Rosenthal, the co-founder of Cultivated Media and the host of today's show, Cultivated Live. And since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has to be industry first, providing the cannabis industry with the most important, insightful, and useful information to our audience. And we started by a daily newsletter. We want you to subscribe to that daily newsletter, but we also wanted to meet the industry where they are online. So we stream this daily stream on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So thank you for following along with the daily stream. And here's what we do. I'm going to run down the news stories of the day and what's driving the news of the industry, but then we're going to be joined by Arana Hankin-Biggers from the travel agency, a Cannabis Store. She's making huge waves, and the store's making huge waves in New York. We're going to dive deep into what's happening in the shops there and in New York overall. So stay tuned for that after the news. And let's get to what's driving the cannabis news today. A new bill introduced this week by New York legislators in both the state's chambers has a new strategy to enforce illicit cannabis sale. If passed, it would revoke a shop's licenses to sell cigarettes, alcohol, and lottery tickets if they're found to be selling illicit cannabis. Now, the bill was introduced by Senator Jamal Bailey and its counterpart in the state assembly, John Zaccaro Jr. You can read the full text on the bill if you go to cultivated.news. See right here. You can find it. Now, everybody, if you've watched the show, you're aware that the problem in New York is facing with cannabis sellers who are not licensed. These shops, mostly bodegas or vape shops, transition into like bootleg dispensaries following legalization, and they are all over the city. And shutting them down has been a unsuccessful game of whack-a-mole. So the regulators are looking for other ways, and the state's looking for other ways to get control of this. And so they've generally been reluctant to strongly enforce illicit cannabis sellers as a whole, because the whole point of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act was to legalize cannabis in New York and not make it a criminal justice issue. So this is another attempt to undergird, I guess that's the word, the legal cannabis industry. So more on that, again, is on cultivated.news. Read the full bill there, but it seems like things are happening in New York, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, from New York to D.C., Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen came out in support of the Safer Banking Act yesterday. Here's what she said to Representative Dave Joyce, a Republican co-sponsor of the bill, at a congressional hearing on Thursday. I think it's a real problem, and it would be desirable to have legislation that alleviated this problem. The fact that marijuana is outlawed by the federal government creates an impediment to banks' willingness to provide banking services to cannabis firms, and it creates all the problems that you're familiar with. So there you go. Count the Treasury Secretary among the supporters for the Safer Banking Act, along with the Senate Majority Leader, the American Bankers Association, and dozens of members of Congress from both parties. So let's see if it gets done in this session. Now from D.C. to where I live in Canada, a long-awaited report on how Canada's legalization efforts are going was released yesterday. It's called, it's a mouthful, Legislative Review of the Cannabis Act Final Report of the Expert Panel. And there appears to be some momentum on some things, including some of the really restrictive packaging on cannabis, also some of the excise tax implications. There's a call to look at what's happening there. There's some good news for patients as well. The report recommended that the medical cannabis program remain intact, which is good both for patients and the industry, and a possible road to have it available in some pharmacies, medical cannabis. So that is an interesting development as well. For those that don't follow it as closely as I do, the Canadian industry has been struggling, to say the least, after launching too much fanfare in 2018 when the country became the first GA country to legalize. The tough regulatory and tax structure, fierce competition, and provincially run wholesale has squeezed the cannabis industry considerably. But this report is a milestone event that looks at the Cannabis Act and recommends improvements to appropriate federal ministries and other regulatory bodies throughout the country. So it's a long time coming, and while the industry has some reason to celebrate, it remains to be seen how important these will be, these improvements or recommendations. Now, one of the things that was not recommended was a change to the 10 milligram edible per package limit. So that was something that folks hoped would change, but it doesn't look like it will. That's what's driving the news today. Give me 1 second. I will bring up Arana. I need to do a couple things on my end. There we go. There we go. Arana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi.
Hi. As we
For some reason, I can't hear you, Jay.
Oh, you can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? It's like the TV commercial.
Hello?
Hello.
There you go.
There
There
we
you go.
go. We'll just edit that part out of the final
Sorry
cut.
about that.
That's okay.
I have some new
Arana,
headphones today.
thank you for making time this morning. I was joking at the beginning that the travel agency, a Cannabis Store, which I think was initially called Union Square Travel Agency, is like a bright spot, to my mind, in the New York cannabis industry. Brand spanking new stores and expansion. How's it going from your perspective in your shops? Because it looks great.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a really amazing ride. We've barely been open for a year in Union Square, right? We opened February 13th last year. So
Okay.
we're just past our year anniversary. And as you said, we are expanding the brand. So we're going by the new name as The Travel Agency, as we're opened up our second location in downtown Brooklyn, across the street from the Apple Store next to Barclays Center. And yeah, it's really been incredibly exciting. It's, certainly a tumultuous time here in New York cannabis, and it's been challenging. It's certainly not without challenge, and it continues to be a bit of an emotional roller coaster. But we're surviving, and we have just an incredible team, which is it's the reason for our success. Is our leadership team has extensive experience in cannabis, right? They come from the West Coast. So we've poached a lot of folks from other markets, from the New Jersey market, from the California market, to help us support and stand up our business here in New York.
Oh, I want to dive into that, and then we'll get to other stuff too. But I cover the industry fairly extensively and have for a long time, and there's so much emphasis on getting to open, right?
Yep.
Which is amazing, and that is kudos on the regulatory front, the real estate front, getting the financing in order, getting the store staffed up, all those things. But then the doors open, and then you're in a pretty competitive, challenging retail environment, which is a whole different set of challenges. Like, how have you thought about that transition from like getting open to staying open or being open? Because it is a challenging retail environment where every customer is relatively new, the staff is new, the situation, like all those things. It is a real retail operation, which I think some people don't think about because they're so worried about getting open.
For sure. I mean, maintaining a steady flow of customers has been immensely challenging. We're just getting into the spring season, so it was definitely quieter after the holidays, right? And obviously, with all the competition from the illicit market, you have to be incredibly aggressive about driving people to your store. I mean, I think, unfortunately, I think New York was very naive in thinking that they could hand out licenses to folks that don't really have extensive retail experience and expect them to do well, given the immense number of illicit shops. And so, like, how do you distinguish yourself? And I think our business model was always about distinguishing ourselves from the illegal shops by finding the best locations, the prime real estate, but also really leaning into design in a really meaningful way, and arming our budtenders and our team and our staff with all the information they need to really help support the customer experience and help educate customers and help to direct customers to the best products.
Yeah, and we've seen this in other markets, but and it's about to get, I think, more competitive in New York. But creating that customer experience, which you guys have done so well, talk a little bit about what went into sort of the thinking behind that, because from the name to the experience to even celebrity, Amy Sedaris, like bringing people into the shop seems to be the first thing. Selling them cannabis may be secondary, but like, talk a little bit about what went into that thought process, because it is, I think, a really thoughtful approach, but also one well executed.
Yeah, I think we were really committed to creating a space that felt like a New York dispensary. Our team interviewed like nearly 12 different dispensary designers, and really wanted to see something different. I mean, even in New York, even the legal ones, there's very few dispensaries that have like a unique design to it. And so we ended up going with an architect who had never designed a dispensary before, just a high-end retail designer who had worked on museum projects and a lot of high-end retail throughout the world. And we worked with them and with our cannabis consultants to design this really fun space. We've worked with mainstream branding consultants who had no cannabis experience, really leaning into just the best creatives we could find, as opposed to people with cannabis experience. And I think that really worked in our favor in the New York market.
And tell me, you've obviously been with probably hundreds or thousands of people that have gone to the shop for the first time. Like, what is that? Well, and maybe that it's their first time actually in a dispensary
for
at
sure.
all. Talk a little about what people's the most common words that you hear when people are people just wowed because of all of it, or like they didn't think that's what a cannabis store would look like? Like, what are people's reactions when they get in?
Yeah, folks were definitely immediately wowed, because I don't think it really looks like any other dispensary, even in the ones on the West Coast. And even in New York, I mean, folks who maybe have been to one or two in their life, this does not compare to certainly a regular smoke shop or one of the illicit shops. So the design, I think, blows folks away. I mean, it's meant to kind of be reminiscent of the TWA Saarinen terminal at JFK. So it's really meant to kind of feel like you're on your way to taking a trip. And I think, but more than anything, people are really blown away by how great our bud tenders are. And not just, how knowledgeable they are, they have great customer service, but they're just really nice, friendly, outgoing, excited, energetic people. Everyone who works there is like super excited about cannabis and super excited about being in one of the first dispensaries in New York. And it shows. And we have a really amazing team.
Can you dive a little bit into that, like what the training looks like, or sort of like initially to get people up to speed, but then ongoing because products have changed, the customer expectations change, the business changes. Like, talk a little bit about sort of the training, if you could, because we actually talked about it yesterday on yesterday's show. But talk a little bit about that, because I think, again, like there's so much emphasis in getting to day 0, like getting to day 10, 20, and 50, or 365 is where the success can be.
For sure. And we have an incredible VP of retail, Mike Conway, who we poached from Ascend in New Jersey. So he had managed 3 dispensaries there. He helped to convert their medical market to recreational market. Prior to that, he was managing dispensaries for Curaleaf in Massachusetts. And before that, he managed 16 Walgreens in Manhattan, like in the same neighborhood where we're located now, which is one of the main reasons why we brought him in, because he had experience working in the city. So he's developed this very robust training program. It's a week-long paid training that we take all of our bud tenders through, that include robust customer service, history of cannabis, the effects of cannabis in the endocannabinoid system, how to direct new customers, seasoned customers, et cetera. But their whole management team is very, very seasoned in determining how to meet all of our revenue goals, right? And just the difference between, as you mentioned on the yesterday's show, between gross and net sales.
You watched.
I did. It was a very good podcast. Actually, forwarded the resource onto my teams. I thought it was so valuable. So we're definitely educated about that. I think the challenge may be having information trickle down to the most junior level, because our expenses are so high. We have prime real estate. Our rent is astronomically high. Obviously, the product costs a lot, and there's lots of other expenses that we cannot write off, as you know. I don't know if the bud tenders actually realize that at the lowest level, or in the store at the most junior level. So it's definitely something that we're continuous to work at. We try to do offsites and team meetings on a regular basis. Obviously, we're meeting weekly, but then do like full day retreats to find creative ways within the marketing regulations to help offer new reasons for customers to keep coming back and to attract new customers, because we have so many restrictions in New York. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not. And it's expensive. It may be the most expensive. I mean, maybe San Francisco in some places, but like most expensive places to open a dispensary. And in new markets, the product is more expensive generally as things happen. But can you zoom out a little bit? And I would love your sense of like what could be improved in New York, not necessarily for your shops, but overall to get more people, to get you more competition. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but certainly that's coming. But like, are there things that you found in the process that just could be sped up or could be alleviated, or that sort of the burdens in New York could they? I mean, they're not going to license 1,000 people tomorrow, but how do you get closer to 1,000 in the state without doing 80 a year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough. I mean, we already have close to over 500 licenses have been issued in New York, and only 80 or so dispensaries that have opened up. And that's not because we don't have people who don't have the paper in hand to open up a store. It's because of the great capital needs required to open up a dispensary. And I think the state was incredibly well-intentioned, and the program that they put forth was the most progressive in the country at the time, but it comes with many, many challenges. And much of those challenges, or many of those challenges, are because of this robust illegal illicit market. Certainly for folks who have opened up already, the biggest challenge probably is bringing in customers because of the restrictions around these marketing regulations. So many of the legal stores, they blacked out their windows. So you really have no idea even what it is. If you're a passerby walking by, we're not allowed to show any cannabis product from the street. So you can't have any cannabis product visible whatsoever. We're limited to only 2 signs. We can't have any neon signs. So we can't have any, we had all these really cute little kitsch sayings that you want to put on the windows. We couldn't do any of that. So we're really limited in how we can design the facade. And then we can't even do, like, the thing that I keep harping on that's really frustrating to me, because we do all we can to support New York born brands, is to do like
Right.
brand activation events in the
Yeah.
store. We can't do that. So that's really, it's a struggle.
It's almost like you see what's happening around you in the bodegas, like whatever, and then you're like, and I can't do the simplest things in the store
I know.
that would be in store, age gated, like all those things. It's like the regulations are there almost for no purpose, right? They're just regulations to be regulations, not that this is, I can say from a little bit of hindsight here in Canada, as I was talking about during this show, is like at some point those things go away, or at least they get revisited. It's just,
That's correct.
it's really hard as a new business to say, open the doors, spend all this capital, be a great player, follow all the rules, but don't put up more than 2 signs, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like,
And the legislators are realizing that they need to backtrack and revisit that. Cannabis has such a wide, broad stigma that it took so long and was so hard for it to just become legal here recreationally in New York, that it's going to be a process to start unwinding some of these laws that people now realize are nonsensical and just hurt the industry.
yeah, but it does seem like, at least this week, honestly, that some of the movement is happening, right? I mean, I think it was 6 weeks from when Governor Hochul called it a disaster to then calling for a top-down review of the OCM.
Yeah.
And it looks like it'll be, there'll be a review and there'll be recommendations, and hopefully those recommendations lead to action, some of the ones you're talking about. But again, as I think I said before we even came on, like, I live in Toronto. We have, I think, 500 dispensaries in the city of Toronto, and now less because some are going out of business because the competition is so great. But the best way to go after the illicit cannabis sales, is actually open up more shops, because the more people see a travel agency, right, every day, and can walk in and buy cannabis, the more they're going to buy cannabis at your shop as opposed to someone else's. And I want to sort of think about that, because you talked about your shop, Union Square, Brooklyn, and like, what does the future of the travel agency look like? If you want to share sort of, you're going to take, like, will there be a travel agency in Buffalo down the street from me, or is it really going to be a sort of city-centric brand?
It's just city-centric for now, just because we know the folks in New York City. Cannabis is really all about community, knowing your neighbors, the police folks at the local precincts. You really have to be entrenched in your community, I believe, in order to run a successful dispensary. So we have our downtown Brooklyn location, which just opened up as a pop-up while we're building out our permanent space. The permanent space is scheduled to open probably mid-May. And then we have a location on Fifth Avenue between 47th and 48th that should open probably early May, probably around the same time, May-ish. So it's super exciting. These are all in partnership with card license holders. So we're really, excited to be able to support the growth of a card business and to ensure that they're able to actually build generational wealth for their families in a meaningful way. And so we're very much committed to doing that. As you know, our first dispensary is actually a partnership with the Doe Fund. All of these license holders actually are the owners, and we operate it on their behalf. So the Doe Fund has benefited quite a bit already in just the year we've been open. And that's been a really exciting partnership that we're able to give back in such a meaningful way.
Yeah. And it's talking to you that gives me hope for, of course, the New York market, but also other markets that are like nascent, right? That are thinking about what they could do, how they could do it right. Like, there are great examples of how it can be done right, even in the midst of sort of New York, which has the challenges. But you think of like states like Pennsylvania that are looking at it now, new markets like Maryland and Missouri, like there's so much happening. And I wonder, sort of, when you have folks come into the shops from other places, whether they have legal cannabis or not, I imagine some people, it's their first actual experience in a dispensary, and it must blow their mind. Like, especially for people not in New York, where their minds are blown anyway when they're sort of walking around Manhattan. But like, they come in and like, oh my goodness, this is what the future could look like.
Yeah, I mean, even folks who've been in many, many dispensaries are still blown away. I mean, not to toot our own horn, but it's a really unique space. And we just hope that folks will continue to be creative in the cannabis space, right? And the space will continue to grow, because it really does help to destigmatize it as well when people are able to see these unique, kind of funky, creative, design-forward spaces.
Yeah. Well, Lorraine, I really love what you're doing and appreciate what you're doing. And thank you for what you're doing. And thank you for making time this morning, because we like to, it's always good to end the week on a really positive note and sort of talk to operators who are doing great work. So thank you so much for making time. We appreciate following the success and the growth of the travel agency, a Cannabis Store. So thank you for making time. We look forward to connecting with you as time goes on, and maybe we'll stop on by one of the shops in the near term.
Please come visit us, Jay. I'd love to give you a tour.
Well, Well, maybe I'll just get in the car right now. I'll be there by tomorrow morning. I really appreciate it. That is today's Cultivated Live. We encourage you to subscribe to our daily newsletter at cultivated.news. Follow us on LinkedIn. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. We'll be back here Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern on LinkedIn and YouTube. Have a great weekend, everybody. And buy cannabis at your local dispensary, especially if you're in New York City, near Union Square or Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. Stop by Arana Shops, travel agency, a Cannabis Store. Thank you so much. We'll see everybody next week.